Controlling the python population here in Florida. Governor DeSantis spoke in Stewart today about some new actions.
The Florida Everglades covers nearly 2 million acres of wetland, sawgrass, cypress forest, and black water. It is one of the most studied ecosystems on Earth. However, for the past 30 years, Burmese pythons have been quietly dismantling it from within. They are killing off entire populations of mammals with a speed that took scientists years to even notice. A 2012 federal study found that raccoon sightings in parts of the Everglades had dropped by 99.3%. Opossums are down 98.9%. Rabbits, foxes, and marsh rats are effectively extinct. However, right now, something has started taking down these giant pythons. And the animals that were on the verge of extinction have started to return to this ecosystem. So how is this happening? What is this mysterious animal that's hunting one of the largest snakes in the world? And could it finally tip the balance back in nature's favor? Let's get into it. A biological disaster. Burmese pythons are not from Florida. They are not from anywhere close to Florida. Their native range is the tropical forests and wetlands of Southeast Asia. In Asia, millions of years of coevolution have produced predators, parasites, and diseases that keep their populations in check. None of those controls exist in southern Florida. The Everglades never evolved to deal with a constricting snake that can grow to 18 feet and weigh over 200 pounds. The problem started with the exotic pet trade during the 1980s and 1990s. Baby Burmese pythons were imported into the United States by the thousands. They were easy to handle and looked extraordinary in a tank. The issue is that they grow up to become enormous adult pythons. Many owners eventually made a catastrophic decision and released them, while others escaped. Hurricane Andrew in 1992 is often cited as a tipping point. The Category 5 storm destroyed breeding facilities across South Florida. An unknown number of captive pythons were released directly into the adjacent wetlands. By the early 2000s, it was clear something was wrong. The number of mammals in Everglades National Park was collapsing. The 2012 study, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, put into numbers what researchers had suspected. Raccoons were down 99.3%, opossums 98.9%, white-tailed deer 94%, and bobcats 87.5%. Rabbits and foxes had basically disappeared from areas where they had lived for generations. To put it in perspective, these weren't just simple population dips. Raccoons had been one of the most commonly sighted animals in the Everglades through the 1990s. By the mid-2000s, you could drive through the park for hours and not see a single one. The response was massive, but largely ineffective. State agencies deployed hunting programs, detection dogs, thermal drones, environmental DNA testing, acoustic monitoring, and aerial surveys. The annual Florida Python Challenge recruited public hunters. By 2020, Florida wildlife officials announced the 5,000th python removed from the Everglades. Researchers estimated the actual population at anywhere from tens of thousands to well over 100,000. 5,000 was barely a scratch. The Conservancy of Southwest Florida responded by developing one of the more creative solutions in invasive species management, the Scout Snake Program. They understood that finding the pythons directly is nearly impossible given how well they hide. So Bartoszek's team found a way around that problem. They fit male pythons with transmitters and release them back into the wild during the breeding season. Male pythons follow female pheromone trails. A scout snake leads researchers directly to reproductive females. The female is then euthanized, stopping potentially dozens of eggs from ever hatching. Since 2013, the program has intercepted more than 20,000 python eggs in a 200-square-mile study area. It remains one of the most efficient removal strategies ever developed for this specific invasion. Everything was going according to plan, and the transmitters were revealing exactly how these invasive snakes lived, hunted, and reproduced. However, then, all of a sudden, multiple snake trackers went silent. Initially, the researchers assumed the pythons had simply died. But when they went to recover the transmitters, what they found would unravel a mystery that no one saw coming. The missing pythons. In the summer of 2021, wildlife biologist Ian Bartoszek noticed something that shouldn't have been possible. One of the radio transmitters his team had been monitoring suddenly stopped behaving normally. At first, nothing seemed unusual. A transmitter occasionally became stationary when a python found a good hiding spot or remained motionless while digesting a meal. But this signal wasn't behaving like that. It didn't drift slowly through the swamp, and it didn't remain in one location for a day before moving again. It simply stopped. To experienced field researchers, that pattern meant only one thing: the animal was dead or in serious trouble. Bartoszek's team grabbed their equipment and made their way to the last known coordinates. They pushed through dense sawgrass, crossed waist-deep water, and followed the steady electronic pulse echoing from somewhere ahead. But when they finally reached the location, nothing made sense. There was no python, no blood, no tracks, no signs of a struggle, just the transmitter, still broadcasting from somewhere in the swamp. The snake hadn't died where the signal stopped. It had disappeared completely, taking the transmitter with it. At first, the team treated it as a strange, isolated incident, but within months, it happened again. And then, again, 3 healthy, radio-tracked Burmese pythons had vanished without a trace, while their transmitters continued broadcasting. Whatever was happening wasn't an accident. The researchers collected every piece of evidence they could find and sent the remains to the lab, hoping the analysis would provide an answer. When the X-rays finally came back, they revealed something no one had expected. Coiled inside the stomach of an unknown predator was the unmistakable spine of a Burmese python. Even more astonishing, the radio transmitter was still inside it. One of the consumed snakes had weighed more than 50 pounds and measured nearly 13 feet long. Yet something had managed to kill it, swallow it whole, and continue moving through the Everglades as though nothing had happened. For decades, Burmese pythons had spread through the Everglades with almost no opposition. They had become one of the most successful invasive predators in North America, and scientists believed very few animals could challenge them. Now, the evidence suggested otherwise. Something was hunting the hunter. But before the researchers could understand why it was happening, they first had to answer an even bigger question. What animal was capable of taking down a giant Burmese python, eliminating the suspects? When Bartoszek's team understood the scale of what they were dealing with, they started working backwards. Something had killed and consumed 3 large Burmese pythons. Even though the Everglades is not short of dangerous animals, nothing like this had happened before. So, who did it? Alligators were the first obvious candidates. They are ancient predators that have shared the wetlands with everything that has ever lived. Alligators and pythons had already been documented attacking each other in the wild. There are photographs of both outcomes: pythons that swallowed alligators and alligators that tore pythons apart. But alligator kills leave very specific evidence: crushed bone, torn tissue, the signature of a massive reptile biting down with 2,000 pounds of force. The missing pythons showed none of that. The transmitters had been swallowed whole, not crushed or scattered. Florida panthers were considered next. Panthers are predators capable of killing pythons. But panthers would also leave behind evidence: puncture wounds, claw marks, the kind of damage only a large mammal leaves. Again, no match. Black bears were also examined and crossed off. Bears are powerful and opportunistic. There was one documented case of a bear attacking a python, but the snake survived. Also, bears don't swallow 13-foot snakes whole. One by one, every known predator in the Everglades was eliminated. None of them explained a 13-foot python disappearing without a trace, with only a still transmitting radio signal. Whatever was doing this was swallowing its prey whole. It was venomous or powerful enough to kill quickly. And it had somehow been operating in one of the most studied ecosystems in the country without anyone registering what it was. The team installed cameras at every location where a transmitter had gone silent. Then they waited. And what those cameras captured would force everyone to rethink an animal they had been walking past for years. Caught on camera. The first few days of footage revealed nothing, and the researchers were doubting whether they had set the cameras in the right place at all. Then, a researcher pulled up a new clip, and the room went quiet. Lying perfectly still against the dark vegetation at the edge of the water was a thick-bodied snake, motionless and almost invisible. Its patterned scales matched the dead leaves and rotting debris around. It was a Florida cottonmouth. And then the clip showed what happened next. A young python moved through the frame. The cottonmouth struck. The speed was so fast that the attack registered as barely a single frame of movement. The python had no time to react. The cottonmouth worked the snake into its mouth tail first. It swallowed the python slowly, inch by inch, until the entire body was gone. The researchers brought the confirmed cases to Zoo Miami scientists for analysis. 2 incidents were formally documented and verified. In one, the cottonmouth measured just over 2.5 feet long. The X-ray image showed a full snake spine coiled inside a much smaller predator. It was pushed against the limits of what biologists considered physically possible. One researcher said it was like watching nature correct itself in real time. The scientists were speechless. For years, they had thought the Everglades stood no chance against the pythons. Every conversation about controlling the invasion had focused on bigger solutions, more hunters, better technology, larger removal programs. So, how was a native resident of the Everglades quietly removing an invasive predator on its own? An underestimated hunter. The Florida cottonmouth is formally known as Agastrodon piscivorus conanti. It is one of the most misunderstood snakes in North America. Most people know them by their defensive display. When threatened, they open their mouths wide to expose the brilliant white interior that gives them their name. It's a warning. Back off or face the consequences. Most animals see that display and walk in the other direction. That is probably why the cottonmouth has spent so long being underestimated as a predator. The real picture is considerably more impressive. Cottonmouths are pit vipers. They carry specialized heat-sensing organs located between their eyes and nostrils. These organs can detect tiny temperature differences with remarkable accuracy. This allows them to locate their prey in complete darkness and through the dense swamp vegetation where there is no visibility. The venom the cottonmouth produces is hemotoxic. It attacks tissue and blood cells, causing severe internal damage that spreads quickly in a much smaller animal. But the most relevant information is the cottonmouth's dietary history. Research has documented them eating 27 different snake species in the wild, including other cottonmouths. Snake eating is not an emergency adaptation for them. It is a routine behavior built into millions of years of evolutionary history. When Burmese pythons arrived in the Everglades, they weren't an impossible challenge for a cottonmouth. They were just a new item on the menu. The key vulnerability is size. Young pythons in the first year or two of life haven't yet developed the muscular mass that makes an adult Burmese python almost impossible to subdue. Additionally, 3 confirmed kills in one study area in a relatively short window suggested this wasn't random. It is a pattern of deliberate exploitation of a vulnerable prey item. There's also something worth noting about cottonmouth territory. These snakes have lived in the Florida wetlands for thousands of years. They know every route and channel. The pythons are newcomers navigating terrain the cottonmouth has owned for millennia. On a battlefield that familiar, with heat sensors and venom, the cottonmouth has more advantages than its size suggests. From the cottonmouth's perspective, a juvenile python isn't a terrifying apex predator. It's a meal that wanders into its territory. But the cottonmouth wasn't acting alone, and the more researchers looked, the more they found the same story playing out across species and across the entire food chain. Nature fights back. American alligators had been preying on pythons since the beginning of the invasion. Tracking records from Bartoszek's study documented multiple confirmed python kills by alligators. These ancient reptiles hadn't surrendered their position as apex predators. They had been removing pythons the entire time. The scale of their impact simply hadn't been fully appreciated because nobody had been looking for it. That moment came in June 2021 when a USGS trail camera captured footage that had never been documented before. A bobcat, weighing around 20 pounds, approached an unguarded python nest while the nesting female was absent. Over 2 days, the bobcat ate the eggs, cached some for later, and then returned to feast on them. The research was published in the journal Ecology and Evolution. It marked the first documented case of any animal in Florida preying on Burmese python eggs. The nesting female was nearly 14 feet long and weighed around 120 pounds, approximately 6 times the bobcat's body weight. However, that didn't deter the bobcat. It returned even after the python came back to guard the nest, and the 2 animals had a genuine standoff on camera. The bobcat swiped at the snake. The snake struck back. When the python was later removed by researchers, the bobcat came back to clean up the remaining eggs. Biologists working on the footage said what struck them most was how aware the bobcat appeared. Birds of prey have been documented taking juvenile pythons before they reach a dangerous size. Gulf Coast indigo snakes, a native species, have also been confirmed as python predators. When we look at the complete picture, it is nothing like the story we have been told. The Everglades wasn't a passive victim of the invasion. It was fighting back. Nature was resisting the invasion, but the story the numbers tell is still brutal. The hard numbers. Here is where the honest version of this story has to pump the brakes. The resistance is real. The cottonmouth kills, the bobcat nest raid, the alligator predation, all of it is documented and real. But the math of the invasion still heavily favors the pythons, and no researcher is claiming otherwise. A female Burmese python lays between 30 and 100 eggs in a single clutch. She can reproduce for years. Other than a large alligator, an adult python is nearly invulnerable to everything in the Everglades. The snakes are also extraordinarily difficult to find. They disappear into water, into root systems, into the dense vegetation that covers millions of acres of terrain. These are places no vehicle can reach, and no drone can see through. Yes, The human removal programs have removed thousands of pythons. The Conservancy of Southwest Florida had a record-breaking 2025 to 2026 season. They pulled 177 pythons with a total of over 8,000 pounds from a 200-square-mile area. The numbers are still against the Everglades. But what the cottonmouth discovery revealed changed the question researchers are actually asking. What the swamp is teaching us. The cottonmouth discovery changed how researchers think about the Everglades. For years, we have thought we need more hunters, better detection technology, and larger budgets. The assumption was that without human action, the ecosystem was simply losing. The cottonmouth hadn't waited for a government strategy. The bobcat hadn't needed a researcher to identify the opportunity. The alligators had never changed course at all. Meanwhile, native species were already exploiting weaknesses in the python's life cycle. They target juveniles before they grow too large and raid nests before eggs can hatch. Removing individuals from the gene pool one encounter at a time. Even if none of it is sufficient on its own, it reframes how humans look at the ecosystem. And every signal that goes quiet in an unexpected way is evidence that nature is still fighting back. The Everglades is not going to solve the python crisis on its own, and the researchers who study it are the first to say so. But what the cameras caught in that swamp changed the way scientists think about what an ecosystem is actually capable of. So after hearing all this, what do you think? Is this enough to tip the balance back in the Everglades' favor, or have the pythons already won? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next mystery we dig into. We'll see you in the next one.